Hello, my name is Yessica Holguin. Welcome to The Wealth We Build, a show that uplifts the voices of community leaders, entrepreneurs, organizers, and institutional champions who are taking bold action to close the racial wealth gap. In an era defined by isolation and economic uncertainty, this show serves as the vital reminder that real change isn't just a hope. It is a choice that we make together. We believe we have more than just the power to reshape our economic future. We have the responsibility to build systems rooted in community ownership and dignity. Today, we're going to talk about one of our key pillars, working with place-based institutions, also known as anchor institutions. We partner with these institutions such as universities, hospitals, municipalities, and public entities that are the bedrock of Metro Denver. By aligning the massive economic engines of these institutions with local, minority-owned businesses and cooperatives, we're shifting the flow of capital to ensure that prosperity stays local. With that, I am honored today to be joined by Jervis DiCiccio. Welcome. We're really excited to get into the conversation about anchor institutions. But before we start, tell us, what is community wealth?
I love that question. I mean, the short answer, and probably the most important answer to that question to me, is more dollars in more people's pockets. So we have to make sure that the work that we're doing is resulting in actual dollars and cents for the people and the communities that we're serving. But if you break down community wealth into its two components there, community is a word that to me is associated with common interest and common place. And common interest, I think, has more than one meaning here. It's not just necessarily the common interests of, a particular group within a particular place, or even just a neighborhood and everyone in it. It's an understanding of solidarity and how doing the right thing is better for all of us. So there's the specific communities that we serve, but there's the understanding that this work is serving a growth towards a better system, a better economy for everyone. And so on the community side, that's what I think of. On the wealth side, I have a background in finance and in wealth planning, and that informs a lot of the way I think about wealth. And I did say earlier, dollars in people's pockets, but as we know, it's not just dollars. It has to be ownership. It has to be a different workforce system. It has to be a system that's rewarding people for the work they're doing in a fair and equitable way. And so on the wealth side, I think about two things. One, growing the pie. How can we create a system that creates more abundance? And then two, sharing the pie. How can we make sure that more people have access to a fair slice of that pie?
Yeah, that definitely makes sense. And when we have wealth that can stay in our communities, the beneficiaries are not just the business owners, right? It is our communities, and the ripple effects can be significant. So tell me, what is an anchor institution? How would you define an anchor institution?
You answered it a little bit in the introduction there. It's a place-based institution that has some roots. The easiest way to think about it, I think, is eds, meds, and government. So higher education, University of Colorado, Metro State University at Denver, the Community College of Denver, Denver University. Those are all local Denver area anchors. Healthcare systems like Denver Health, UC Health, and non-local healthcare systems as well that have rooted facilities in Denver, like Intermountain Health, Common Spirit, and Kaiser Permanente. Those are all examples of anchor institutions, as well as government agencies and municipalities. And then you could add infrastructure like Denver Water, the Denver Airport. So those are all definitions, or those are all examples of anchors.
Yeah, and they're rooted in place because there's no great deal that any other state or any other city can give DIA to move to another place, right? So they are here, they've been here for many years, and they'll probably be here for many, many, many years to come. So tell me, why are these anchor institutions such a big economic opportunity?
Well, I mean, the first answer is in the word big. They're huge. So we're talking about some of the largest employers in the state. When you're talking about the Denver Airport, when you're talking about the University of Colorado system, and you're talking about the state of Colorado, you're talking about three of the largest employers, if not the three largest employers in the state. So scale is a huge part of it. But it isn't just scale. It isn't just number of employees. It isn't even just number of dollars. It's also influence. Because of their size, because of the number of people they employ. And for most anchor institutions, there is also a close relationship with government. So they have policy influence, they have community influence. So it's all of those factors together. It's thinking about not just the power of the dollars that they have, but the power they have to affect policy, to affect community change. I think about projects like the Broncos Stadium, the upcoming new Broncos Stadium. And there are cities and anchor collaboratives, and we'll talk more about this, I think, later, but there are places that consider sports teams to be anchor institutions because the Chicago Blackhawks, for example, and I'm using them because they are an anchor in Chicago, can't just become the Denver Blackhawks. Sports teams do sometimes change cities, but that's rare and unlikely. So the Denver Broncos are actually going to be moving their stadium to where Denver Water is currently located. So there's an opportunity there. We're talking a $1 billion plus infrastructure project to make sure that local skilled trades folks and the communities are part of that project, and that those dollars are spent more locally so that the dollars recycle 3 to 4 times as much in community as opposed to just with large prime contractors nationally.
Yeah, so tell me a little bit about the opportunity with procurement. What could that look like?
Yeah, I love that question. So procurement, if folks aren't familiar with that term, is basically how you buy stuff as an organization. Anchor institutions tend to have very complex procurement processes, and they do that for a lot of very good reasons. They have specific needs, they have specific standards, they have protocols, they have compliance. So in order to be a vendor working for an anchor institution, you oftentimes have to complete a complicated RFP or request for proposal or get on an approved vendor list. Some of these asks are in the hundreds of pages, and they're complex, and they ask for a lot of documentation. They ask a lot of questions that a lot of people wouldn't understand. I certainly wouldn't understand all of them. And so helping local businesses even get into the systems can be a challenge to get them qualified or to get them on a list that anchor institutions can use. That can be even more difficult if English isn't your first language.
Right.
Most of these applications are only in English. They're not translated. And there's no assistance on the part of the anchors to complete the applications in many cases. So the Center for Community Wealth steps in and helps local businesses, number one, understand all the components of those documents, and also complete those documents and get on the approved lists and even have the opportunity to get some business from an anchor. So procurement and impact procurement as an anchor strategy on the anchor side is about buying more locally. And specifically, as we talk about it at the Center for Community Wealth, it's about buying more from local diverse businesses. And the accepted language of today is buying more from historically underutilized businesses. So people of color, LGBTQ community, women, veteran-owned businesses, those are all examples of historically underutilized businesses. And so we are working directly with anchors to break down all those barriers to procurement and to give them access to the greatness in their communities. And I think that's a really important way of framing this. We were just meeting with the Denver Economic Development and Opportunity Office yesterday and talking about how it's so important not to think of local procurement as, well, we're going to do the nice thing and invest in our neighborhood or the thing that feels good. There's greatness in these Denver neighborhoods. And anchors have the opportunity to take part in some of that greatness, to experience some of that greatness. And local procurement for them means not suffering on cost or quality. In fact, in many cases, you're getting higher quality, but creating an ecosystem where, especially on the skilled trades side, where we're seeing consolidation by the large prime contractors, we're seeing prices go up, and that means for anchors that prices are also going up for taxpayers. And when anchors have a local procurement strategy, they're creating more agile, more adaptable institutions. Again, was meeting with a large healthcare anchor this morning, and they had some specific requests for an event this fall. There's no way that a large corporate caterer could meet those requests, but our caterers can. And so it's not just valuable from the standpoint of building communities. It's valuable for the anchors in that they're going to have a more resilient, adaptable supply chain, and creating more competition can help bring down costs.
Yeah. We learned during the pandemic that resilient, adaptable was the key, right? And that is provided when we have strong local communities. Where do you see some of the biggest challenges?
Oh, I love that question, Yessica. And I will be candid.
Thank you.
In Denver, our anchor collaborative is pretty far behind what other anchor collaboratives are elsewhere in the country. And we'll talk some more about some good examples, I think, a little bit later. We have this beautiful spirit in Colorado of freedom and individual choice. And at all of the anchors that I speak with, decentralized decision-making is a term that I hear over and over again. And while there's a lot of positive aspects to that, what it also means is that the data can be disorganized and that there aren't always well-crafted initiatives and certainly supported initiatives, funded initiatives towards impact procurement and impact investing, which we'll talk more about later as well. So to me, one of the opportunities is to help the anchors come together with a shared understanding and a spirit of collaboration that can help us build something that's really more impactful, because when we come together, we can enhance and magnify our impact. And to have that sort of opportunity to have peers that you can look to for support and ideas on how you can do things better at your own institution. So I would say one of our challenges is that there isn't enough collaboration within our anchor group, and that we haven't structured our anchor collaborative in a way that some other cities have.
So tell me a little bit about the impact investing side, and where's the opportunity with anchor institutions?
Oh, so my financial background gets me really excited about this one. And there's sort of a push and pull, because procurement is the now, right? Procurement is dollars in people's pockets now, and these investment projects can be years before you see the outcomes, and then you have to sort of study a few layers deeper to see how all the outcomes really have impacted community. But the healthcare anchor network defines impact investing, a reasonable commitment, as a 1% investment of the long-term portfolio of an endowment. So healthcare institutions and higher educational institutions all have these large investment funds that are operating in perpetuity in order to provide operating dollars to the organizations, or in the case of the healthcare institutions, many times those organizations are specifically operating to provide charitable contributions to communities. And so the suggestion is that if you just take 1% of that portfolio that's already invested in an instrument that's getting a cash-like return, so that would typically be like a 1% to 4% annual return, and you invested it in program-related investments, or PRIs, that were giving you the same return, that same 1% to 4% return, but were specifically targeting local and hyper-local projects like affordable housing, like community ownership, like shared real estate spaces, like building cooperative businesses that are injecting more wealth into their communities and into their employees' pockets, that you can really magnify your impact. And I'll talk in a minute about a really cool example of another anchor collaborative that's doing that work specifically.
Great. It's energizing to see that there are so many opportunities to invest the dollars locally, so that we can see the results and the outcomes in our communities that we want to see, and that there are models that are already doing this. And so give me some examples. Let's jump into some of those examples.
Yeah, thank you. I'm really excited about this. So one of my favorite anchor collaborative examples, success stories, is the Washington, D.C. Anchor Partnership. And this is a really cool collaborative, not just in the way it operates, but also in the way it's funded. And that's really important here too, is this work takes funding to do. And in DC, the funding comes 50% from the city of Washington, D.C., and 50% from Wells Fargo and JP Morgan Chase. So you have a combination of large corporates and government funding the work. And what is the work? The work is that there are 17 anchor institutions in that anchor partnership. For reference, the Denver Anchor Network is around 15. There's 17 anchor institutions. 13 of those institutions have all of their procurement, their spend dollars, analyzed by the DC Anchor Partnership at no cost to those institutions. So government and corporates are paying for this work to be done. And that allows all of those anchors to have really detailed spend data and understand where there might be disparities, where there might be more opportunities to invest locally, why they might want to do that. And this group also did an overlay of what are the needs that these anchor institutions have in terms of their spend, and what is the community ready to provide, because those things don't always perfectly overlap or align. And this study demonstrated all the places that these anchor institutions could invest more locally, did some matchmaking between anchor institutions and local vendors. And the results have just been astounding. So one of these anchor institutions has quadrupled their local spend. Wow. They've seen that impact their customer base, their community relationships, their workforce, and the people that they're able to hire, the whole look and feel of the organization. And you mentioned the pandemic. If this work had not been done prior to the pandemic, this large hospital system does not believe that they would have gotten the necessary PPE, personal protective equipment, to stay open. But because they had that local, resilient, adaptable supply chain, when the big guys said, no, you're not the biggest hospital, so you're a little further down our list, they were able to go local and get what they needed. And that's, to me, just such a great and beautiful example of how this work can be beneficial to everyone involved.
Yeah, that's such a great example, because I think we have such a big opportunity to create not just a pathway for wealth creation for these businesses, our current businesses, but really for generations to come. And so tell me a little bit about the work that's being done to impact at the systems level.
If I'd been given a whole half hour to talk about community wealth, this is where I really would have gone, right? To truly build community wealth, we have to have systems in place that are, again, creating a bigger pie and fairly distributing that pie. And right now, we have systems that are more extractive, that are more competitive instead of cooperative. And we're seeing that impact our economy. We're seeing that impact our neighborhoods. Most people that are working today, that go to work every day, feel like they're trading their well-being for a paycheck. And that's not a sustainable model. 20 years ago, definitely in the 80s when I was growing up, you went to work, you got your paycheck, you knew that work extracted from your well-being, but your paycheck was adequate for you to be able to take that and then rediscover or find well-being in a much easier fashion than you could today. Why is that? Well, housing was a lot less expensive relative to paychecks. Healthcare was by far less expensive relative to paychecks. Education was far less expensive relative to paychecks. So the biggest expenses that families have cost a lot less on a inflation-adjusted basis versus your wages compared to today. And so right now we have this economic system where people are going to work and they're not getting wealthier. They're not getting healthier. The opposite is true. They're going to work and they're falling further behind on their bills, or they're accumulating credit card debt. And that causes them to take fewer steps to take care of their health. That's the first thing we see people ignore when money is tight. I'm not going to go to my primary care doctor because I'm afraid I'm sick and that's going to cost me money I don't have. That means typically you exercise less. You might not take all of the medications that you need. So there's lots of these structural components to our current economy that are unsustainable, that are going to cause it to collapse if we don't repair them. So what does a more collective economy look like? And anchors have a huge impact on shaping that economy. By the way they behave, even more than public policy, is going to set the standards and norms for what other companies and organizations do and are expected to do. There's real power in sort of that a positive peer pressure of anchors, pushing each other to be a little bit better in impact procurement, a little bit better in impact investing, a little bit better in impact workforce hiring, and seeing that compound over time, and then taking that also into the policy sphere and saying, hey, how can we think about systems that are going to be more impactful for neighborhoods and build these more resilient, adaptable communities where more people have access to health and wealth?
Yeah, because systems level change can start with each institution, right? With their policies. You can go to the ordinance level, and the state level would be amazing. So tell me a little bit about these institutions, and what advice would you give them to move towards a closer reality of investing locally and procuring locally?
I don't know that it's necessarily my place to give advice to these anchor institutions. What I would do is I would share with them working models, and I would compare and contrast that with what they're currently doing. So I really see my role as facilitating these anchor institutions to make a community commitment, whatever that is, whatever inspires them. And I can tell you, having spoken with many of them, that what they want to do institutionally can vary pretty widely. There are some common threads, but it can vary pretty widely. So empower them to turn that desire for community impact. And almost all of them have a charter that requires community impact. The healthcare institutions are performing community health needs assessments, or CHNAs. You have the educational institutions that all have charters that require local investment, and certainly governments and municipalities are interested in local impact. So how can you take those desires, which are very clearly there for all of these institutions, and convert them into some kind of measurable commitment? On the impact purchasing side, you could say, I want to do 5% more purchasing this year from local, historically underutilized businesses. Let's make that commitment. Well, if you make that commitment, now you have to measure that spend. You have to know what your baseline was. You have to watch your increase, and you have to make an institutional, and this is where that decentralized decision-making gets problematic, right? You have to say to your institution, hey, we need to meet this goal. And there are organizations that are doing this locally, that have set these numbers, and in some cases are vastly exceeding them, and are seeing that impact their communities and seeing that positively impact their community relationships. Again, also their customer bases, their workforces. This isn't just altruism. There's a lot of benefits for the anchors as well. So the answer to your question would be, determine a commitment, make the commitment, and then work with a facilitating entity like the Center for Community Wealth to make sure you fulfill it.
Yeah, I think one of the things that's really important is that for everyone to understand that this is a win-win. This is not about sacrificing something so that others can thrive. And so in the spirit of abundance, I want you to, let's dream together. What could Metro Denver look like in 20 years if we do this work now?
This is, as you know, this is like my fun and maybe my most favorite thing to think about. And the anchors are dreamers too. I had a meeting with a large educational anchor institution on Monday, and we were talking about some of the ideas that I'm going to be sharing at a big meeting next week, where we'll have all the anchors getting together, and we'll be talking about the Center for Community Wealth strategy moving forward. And I shared some of the ideas, and he lit up with one of them. And this idea is an impact investing idea that I've shared with you, where anchor institutions would get together and pool their money to create a fund to buy a local already operating business that's serving anchors. And I shared some ideas. He had a great idea, which is security. So there's private security at every educational institution, at every healthcare institution, and even at our government institutions. I think a lot of people think when you go into one of the government buildings downtown and you go through security that's probably police or some publicly. It's not. That's a private security organization that's providing that security, getting you through the metal detector, et cetera. So the anchor institutions could pool their money into an investment fund, purchase a local security firm, convert it into a cooperative. So now every day those folks that are not getting paid wages that are sufficient to feed a family, to house a family, to meet family needs. So going back to what I was talking about before, how work is extracting wealth and well-being instead of creating it, you can turn that picture around within a cooperative where you have worker ownership, where every day you're going to work, your wealth is growing because you're the owner or part owner of an organization that has a lot of security in its revenue stream because it's coming from the anchors. And the anchors know that their investment is going to yield a return because they know that they're pouring money into these businesses. So you're buying a business that you're a customer that's driving the profit and revenue of that business, and then you're distributing that wealth into community through a worker ownership model. And as you know, worker ownership models have all kinds of amazing outcomes for businesses. They tend to be more resilient, they fire less, they're more profitable. So again, it's that win-win-win. The anchors win, the communities win, the employees win, the businesses win.
And when you think about benefits as a society, you think about security members being owners of their job and the way that they show up in community. And so lots of exciting opportunities there. And I think there's so much more that we can do if we can hold this vision of
absolutely.
Ensuring that our dollars, our tax dollars that are going into community or into these institutions can come back to community in a meaningful way that doesn't extract, but that actually builds wealth, health, for generations to come. So, Jervis, thank you so much for making the time to connect with us and to share more about Anchor Institution's Center for Community Wealth. And for you all showing up today, thank you for tuning in today. For more information on Center for Community Wealth, please visit our website, communitywealth.org, or find us on social media, CCW Denver on Instagram and Facebook, and CCWB on LinkedIn. Thank you. Thank you so much. That was excellent.
Thank you. It was fun.